So we're now in the last two chapters, okay? We've talked about a lot of drugs, right? We've talked about a lot of different kinds of drugs. And today we're going to talk about preventing substance abuse. And then in the final chapter, we'll talk about treating substance abuse. And we're doing both of these at a pretty simple level, okay? We're talking about the general ideas here. People in, let's say, they go into public health, do a lot of preventing substance abuse work. People that go into therapy might do more of the treating substance abuse. So you're going to learn some terminology today. Okay, so when we first say preventing substance abuse, we want to first ask, what are we even trying to prevent? Okay, so, are we trying to prevent actual use? Are we trying to prevent the selling? Are we trying to prevent the growing? Are we trying to prevent the production? Are we trying to prevent all drug use, including alcohol use? Are we trying to prevent drug abuse and its associated harm? So maybe not use, but actually just the abuse. What is our aim? Drugs have always been part of our society, right? So it's difficult to think that we will actually just make them all go away completely. And maybe we wouldn't even want that. Who knows? Depends on who you are and how you feel. Okay? The relative number of people who will have problems with illegal drugs is small. Okay? Prevention efforts are focused on teaching people how to coexist with these drugs. Okay? Sorry, and that's legal drugs. I think I might have said that wrong. Let me say it again. The relative number of people who have problems with legal drugs is small, right? So we're taught to coexist with these different drugs. We coexist with, Tylenol. We coexist with cough syrup. We coexist with some of these other legal drugs like alcohol. Some people have problems with them, but that number is fairly small. Can we do the same thing with illegal drugs, right? Can we prevent abuse even when we're not preventing use or preventing it existing? Okay. There's a traditional approach, and that is presenting negative information about drugs in school. Okay. We'll get into these things, but let's be clear, that approach doesn't work so well. The goal of the approach here is prevention of drug use. All drug use, don't do it. It is complete abstinence. No, drugs are bad. Don't do it. When finally people looked at the effectiveness of this and did an evaluation, we need to ask things like, how many students use drugs in the future? Until the 1970s, most programs were not evaluated. It was just thought that something was better than nothing. Maybe it's not. Okay, I do want you to know these three terms: primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention. This is, note card worthy. Primary prevention. This is typically aimed at young people who have not tried drugs yet. And it doesn't have to be young people, but it typically is. People who have not used anything yet. Primary. It may encourage abstinence. Interestingly, these programs sometimes encourage curiosity and things. I've definitely had clients come to me in the past that have said, like, well, I never thought about using such and such until I saw it at school or I saw it on a TV show. And of course, the TV show's goal is don't use it, but they had never even thought about using it, and now they saw it, so maybe try it. So there's that. Okay, secondary prevention. Secondary prevention is aimed at people who have experimented with drugs. Okay, the goal is prevention of use of more dangerous drugs. Okay, so this is typically going to be sort of like in our college setting where we know people have experimented with alcohol. We know they've probably experimented with other things, but we're going to ask that they kind of do this responsibly and teach them about those types of things, okay? Now, tertiary prevention is aimed at people who have already had problems. So maybe people that have already been through drug treatment. And the goal here is maybe more like a relapse prevention. Primary, secondary, tertiary. Here's some new terms. You ready? New note cards. Okay, so this is universal prevention, selective prevention, and indicated prevention. So the other ones are more of like a time course. This is more based on our target population. Universal prevention would be the entire population. That doesn't mean the entire population of the world, but the entire population of a community, or the entire population of a school. Okay, universal prevention. Everybody gets the same information. Selective prevention. Now we're talking about high-risk groups. Okay, maybe low-income students. Students who are doing poorly in school. Okay, so we're selecting those people that are high risk and giving the intervention to them. The last one is the indicated prevention. Think about indicated individual. Okay, now we're talking about really specific individuals who are showing signs of developing problems. So a specific child that's not doing well in school, a particular child who's been arrested for a DUI or arrested for drunk in public or something. That's indicated prevention. All right, these are different prevention programs that have been used in schools. We're going to talk about these specifically, okay? Now, the knowledge, attitudes, behavior model. Programs typically involve presentations by police officers, former drug users, pharmacologists, often include this traditional scare tactics, right, and/or pharmacological information. The assumptions of the approach are that increasing knowledge about drugs will decrease drug using behavior, and that changing their attitudes will change or decrease drug using behavior. This PowerPoint is written poorly. That should be decreasing drug using behavior. But the idea is that just increasing knowledge will decrease drug using behavior. And again, we've kind of found that that doesn't work. We also think that if we scare them, it will change their attitude. And we also know that that doesn't necessarily work except for like really young kids. Okay, so in the 1970s, this model began to be questioned and some research was done. They actually found that students with more knowledge about drugs tend to have a more positive attitude about drugs, which is the opposite of what they wanted. Early prevention efforts were effective in increasing knowledge about drugs, but not effective in altering behaviors or attitudes. So, not effective, okay? Concerns were raised that drug education programs were increasing drug use. By teaching about drugs students otherwise wouldn't know about, now they have exposure to them and they think, well, I can try that. Okay. Here is a different term, right? Affective education. Remember, affect is like feelings and moods. Okay, so affective domain focuses on emotions, on attitudes, and we try to figure out which emotions and attitudes underlie drug use. So for example, students may use drugs for excitement or for relaxation, for the feelings of control in response to peer pressure. We try to get at why are people using these drugs, and then focus on that, okay? So you may be able to help people with finding other ways to relax, other ways to feel excited, other ways to feel in control, ways to deal with peer pressure, okay? If you know and you express that feeling, maybe that will help. Learning ways to achieve altered emotional states without drugs. Learning to feel valued and accepted in general, okay, may help with peer pressure. So the concepts that go along with affective education are values clarification. Okay, values clarification is teaching students to recognize and to express feelings and beliefs. It assumes that the students already have factual information about drugs. That may or may not be true. Emphasis is placed on generic decision-making skills. Another concept is alternatives to drugs. So this assumes students might take drugs, for the experience, to get high, or whatever it is. So the emphasis here is on finding alternative non-drug activities that give natural highs, like go play basketball. The last concept is personal and social skills. This assumes drug use is in response to personal or social failure. The emphasis is on communicating with others and providing success experiences. So this is like role playing, right? So, oh, you want to take drugs? And the person's like, no, I don't want to take drugs. And the guy's like, oh, but you're so lame if you don't take drugs. And if you want to be cool, you'll use these drugs. And then you teach the child to be like, oh, I don't have to take drugs to be cool. I'm already cool. Something like that. Something hopefully with a few different words than what I just came up with. But that would be the general idea. Anti-drug norms. Remember I told you that the 1980s were pretty much the high peak of most all drug use. Not marijuana, but almost all the other drugs peaked in the 80s. Okay. In 1984, a review of drug prevention programs was done. Most programs didn't contain an appropriate evaluation component, some not at all. The review increased knowledge about drugs. This review found that increased knowledge about drugs had virtually no impact on current or later substance abuse. Affective education placed too little on skills necessary to resist pressure to use drugs. It talked about it, but it didn't give enough. Okay? Few studies demonstrated any success in terms of actual substance abuse prevention. So to this point, we're like doing this, and still finding it's not helping at all. Okay? Two new approaches were developed in response to these criticisms. And those are refusal skills and something called drug-free schools. So refusal skills are this just say no, right? And how to say no. And this is what I was talking about before, but it's now there's a bigger focus on how to say no, why you want to say no, practice saying no. Drug-free schools, this is in 1986, federal government began providing direct aid for drug prevention. Okay? School policies were designed to demonstrate that the school did not condone drugs. So doing like random locker searches, not allowing people to smoke on campus or on school grounds, things like that. Okay? I remember when I was in high school, they had like the drug sniffing dogs that would come through and sniff everybody's lockers and all their cars in the parking lot. So there's that. Okay, so the next thing that was tried is the social influence model. Now, the social influence model is a prevention model adopted from successful smoking programs, okay? So this is programs that have been successful at getting people to quit smoking. So advantages of education research on smoking prevention programs were then directed at adolescents. A large enough proportion of adolescents smoke, so you can actually see behavioral change is possible. You can see it, it's measurable. There's a large enough people that do it. If we're talking about, prevention of like, let's say heroin users in the schools, there's so few users in the first place that it's hard to see changes. smoking, it's easier to see changes. Okay. Also, health consequences of smoking are so clear that there's pretty much, global consensus that preventing smoking is a good goal. Now, within the social influence model, we have some key elements here. The first is training in refusal skills, right? We've talked about this already, demonstrating the kind of social pressures that peers might use to encourage smoking, and then modeling a variety of appropriate responses. I don't want to smoke. That makes you look gross. Okay. Normative education. So this is the idea that everybody's doing it attitude, right? So people really start believing like, well, everybody else drinks more than I do, so I'm not that bad. Or everybody else smokes. Turns out that's not true. Okay, so actually giving people, asking them, seeing that they overestimate, and then presenting actual facts on, for this example, it was smoking trends. To then show people that actually not everybody's doing it, and actually most people are not doing it. Same thing with, like, again, I used drinking as an example before, drinking on college campuses. It was most people, if you ask them about their drinking behaviors, they will, almost all of them will say, I drink less than the average person, right? Which can't possibly be true, because not everybody can drink less than the average, right? It turns out you actually are probably drinking more than the average, but maybe you see other people as drinking more. Maybe they are and maybe they're not. But our ideas or what we estimate our peers to be doing is not always accurate. Okay. Other things here, use of teen leaders. And this is using older students as role models. So not necessarily having, just the old, like, lady or man come in, but using, like, high school students or middle school students come in and talk about it and talk about their experiences with peer pressure and what they did. Kids are more likely to listen to people that are a little bit older than them rather than somebody a lot older than them. Okay? Public commitment to standing before other people and saying out loud that you're not going to smoke, right? So I am not going to smoke. I'm saying it out loud. I can hear myself. I'm making this public commitment. And people are generally less likely to smoke. And then also doing some things that are countering advertising, right? And that is kind of like going through advertisements and seeing like the BS of them. Critical thinking skills is what we're teaching here. Teaching students to analyze, to discover hidden messages in ads, teaching how messages differ from actual effects of smoking, right? Yeah. And then there's the DARE program. We definitely had DARE when I was in school, drug abuse resistance education. Do know what DARE stands for, Drug Abuse Resistance Education. Developed in '83 in Los Angeles, spread to all the states by the early 1990s, widely accepted initially despite lack of studies supporting its effectiveness. To be clear, there are studies over and over and over and over and over again that show that DARE does not work well, if at all. And yet, so much federal money is continued to be poured into this DARE program because it makes people feel good. It makes them feel like they are doing something. They're not. Anyway, I get irritated with this. I get irritated when, like, people just completely ignore research and continue just because it makes them feel better about it. Do it. That is parents or government officials or whoever it is. Like, why don't you pour money into, like, finding things that work better? clearly have issues with this. Okay. It contains components of earlier prevention models, so delivered by trained uniformed police officers, includes elements of social influence model, refusal skills, team leaders, public commitment, includes elements of affective education, esteem building, alternatives to drug use, and decision making. And to tell you the truth, like these things do, even to me, they sound good. I don't really know why it's not working. They sound good. Studies on effectiveness. In '94, one study did find that it increased self-esteem. That's good. But no evidence of long-term reduction in drug use. Another study in '94 showed that it increased knowledge about drugs and social skills. Okay? Effects on drug use were very marginal. 2004, a review of earlier studies showed program effect was so small it was not statistically significant. Not good enough. It's not good enough. Despite the failure to demonstrate a significant impact of the DARE program on drug use, it's continued to be used widely. I also liked that you got a t-shirt. That was cool. Okay. Some programs based on the social influence model, okay, have demonstrated to have some beneficial effects on actual drug use. There are two programs. One is called ALERT. And this is focused on certain things, social influence model. Cigarette experimenters were more likely to quit or to maintain low rates of smoking. Initiation of marijuana smoking among non-users was reduced. Initiation meaning starting use. Level of marijuana smoking among users was reduced. Okay, so that's something. And then life skills training. Life skills training teaches resistance skills, normative education, media influences, and general self-management and social skills. And it has shown some beneficial effects on actual drug use or reduction of drug use. Okay. A different kind of thing that we have is peer programs, okay? The peer influence approaches. This is a little kind of different. So this we're basing on an open discussion among children and adolescents. Underlying assumption is that opinions of adolescents' peers are actually significant influences on behavior. And when they actually hear their peers say, I'm not into that, I'm not interested in it, and they thought in their head everybody was, it can help change opinions, attitudes, things like that. Peer participation programs. So emphasizes becoming participating members of society, right? This typically is focused on youth in high-risk areas. It may involve activities like paid community service. The data seems to be inconclusive on whether or not these things work. We hope they do. They seem, again, like a really great idea. People are pretty supportive of these things, but we need longer-term data, and we just don't have it yet. Okay. The next type of program we have is a parent or family program. These are informational programs. They provide basic information about alcohol and drugs and their use and effects. The rationale for these programs is that well-informed parents can teach appropriate attitudes and can recognize potential problems. I mean, I've known people that like smoke weed in their homes and their moms don't know because their parents don't know what it smells like, or they don't, I don't know, they don't know. I always feel surprised by these things. So informing parents could actually be a good thing, so that they can know what to look out for, they can know when to talk to kids. Maybe they don't know how to talk to kids about these things. For some parents, this is a very awkward conversation. it'll probably just be a continued normal conversation in our house. Everything is weird in our house with 2 psychologists, parents. Poor kids. Family interaction approaches. The families work as a unit to examine, discuss, and confront issues relating to drug use. Okay, so this is the whole family's talking and working together as a team. I like that idea. Programs can improve family communication, which is so important, and strengthen knowledge and skills. So if we're coming at it as a team, then it stops this sort of like bad kid, parents mad, kids mad, nobody's talking, everybody's doing what they want to do, disaster area. Okay, so coming together, common goals. The common goal is to prevent substance abuse. Okay. Parenting skills programs. This is just the parents' focuses on communication, decision making, setting goals and limits. Some parents are not good at that. It's really hard, by the way. I thought it was going to be a lot easier. When teaching parenting before you have kids is way easier than teaching parenting after you have children and realize it's really hard. Okay. Teaching parents when and how to say no to a child. Parent support groups. This is also important. So key adjuncts to skills training or in planning community efforts. So parents can get together and talk about what they've done, what worked, what didn't work, why it might work for somebody else, even if it didn't work for them, to get community things going, on and on. Okay. Community programs. So there are several reasons for organizing prevention programs on a community level. You get a coordinated approach at different levels. So the school's doing it, the parents are doing it, the basketball team is doing it, the church is doing it, all coming at it together. Okay? We can have a greater impact that way. Drug education and prevention can be controversial though. Okay? So sometimes you get it from one person, you get somebody else saying, I don't like the way that you're doing it, or this and that. So programs that involve many groups can receive more widespread community support. So community-based programs can involve many resources, including local businesses and the public media. Communities mobilizing for change on alcohol is one of SAMHSA's model prevention programs. If you're interested more in not just prevention, in information about specific substances, about what the current rates are for what is considered alcohol abuse or binge drinking or anything like that, go to SAMHSA's website. That's SAMHSA, SAMHSA. SAMHSA is a legit research-based good information there. They will also, if you want, send you pamphlets on things. They will, it's a great organization. Check them out if you want. Okay, just moving on, another thing here is workplace programs. So all companies and organizations that obtain federal funding have to adopt a drug-free workplace plan. Okay, this is going to get a little fuzzy when states have different laws than the federal government, but any company that has federal funding still has to adopt this drug-free workplace plan. The most consistent feature is random urine screens, and so that is when you sign up for a job, they may test you at the time, or they make you sign a paper that says you agree to random urine screens, right? They're not accusing you of anything, they're just saying every once in a while we're going to come through and do this. And you say, fine. The ultimate goal is to prevent drug use by making it clear through policies and actions that it is not condoned. Okay? So, this is my last slide. And I think what's so frustrating about talking about prevention is that we spend so much time talking about all the things that have been tried and then end with the sentence, but it doesn't work, right? And the thing is, nothing seems to work well enough, so we need to do more. So what needs to be done in a situation really depends on the motivations for doing it, okay? Example 1 here, a state requirement for drug education. The most appropriate approach might be a balanced combination of factual information and social skills training. It is extremely important to avoid inadvertently demonstrating things you don't want students to do. Don't show them how to make a pipe out of an apple if you don't want them to do that, right? Those kinds of things. Example 2, widespread concern about a local epidemic of drug and alcohol use. The goal would be to organize a community planning effort, okay? Important to avoid negative approaches shown to be ineffective. Now, for example, I know in some of the local communities there's been a concern about heroin use. That's not good. Like, if there is an epidemic of heroin use, that's not good at all. However, these, media outlets really make it so dramatic, and then parents, freak out and don't know what to do, and they don't really know how to plan and organize an appropriate community intervention. There's this more, it's all bad, don't use it ever, and this is what's going to happen to you, and you're going to die, and you're going to go to prison, and you're going to blah, blah, blah. I promise you, if you talk to a teenager that way, they will ignore you at best, okay? Ignore you at best, right? So, keep that in mind. It's important to avoid negative approaches. It's important to avoid these things where we just teach the kids about drugs that they might not have known about. Probably some factual information and social skills training are important. I did have you guys look at that. I asked you to look at the Faces of Meth website, right? And the idea is there, I'm giving you some information. I'm showing you something. I am not showing you how to actually make meth. I am not actually showing you, that this is only what happens to people, but you should be aware. Pictures are pretty, they stay in people's heads, all that. I really hope that at least one of you goes into this field and fixes this. I would love in 10 years to be teaching this chapter completely differently, to be like, so-and-so from my class in 2014 has created a new program and it's so awesome and everybody loves it, it's working, and nobody uses drugs ever. Or maybe some people do it less, okay? I'm going to leave you with that. Next chapter is prevention. Stick with me. I'll see you there.